Welcome, everyone. And Eric, thank you so much for joining. And you've taken out time from your very, very busy schedule. For those people who are discovering Eric for the first time, I'm really jealous of you. I think this call will be amazing. I just want to introduce this man before we go into this call. I met Eric back in 2016 in Mykonos for the first time. And you were one of the speakers at AFES. It was a biohacking conference. And it blew my mind. Obviously, he was the highest rated speaker, absolutely incredible, which I later realized that's just normal for him. But the way you would find Eric at the entire conference, I'm not joking, even to this day at Mind Valley events, that's how you find Eric. You see like wherever there's a large gathering, a bunch of people gathered together, and you see in the center Eric is just talking, adding value, just giving from his whole heart. And I think that expresses your character to me really beautifully. And for me, this call is extremely important personally because you're one of those people who significantly like impacted my life. The way I look, the way I speak, the way I run my business, every single thing has been through the programs that I've learned from you. And right before we were doing this call, Wendy, who's our team member who's facilitating this call, she said, Gautam, Eric's program, WildFit, is one of those few programs that I've actually completed. And I want to talk about that in the first question. But before we go into it, Eric runs, it's the hardest to describe you in a bio because it's kind of puts me into putting you in a box because you do so many different things. I think the first thing that I discovered you in was in the context of your company, WildFit, which I think hands down is the best nutritional program that I've ever encountered. And some of those things that I learned 4 years ago that are still with me to this day. Same thing with your business freedom program. And I learned how to do public speaking with you. And to this day, that's the best personal growth program I have ever taken. And I still recommend people to go there. I think I want to have a lot of conversation. A lot of these, the things that I intended to ask you are already there on YouTube. So we'll just keep referring to those YouTube videos, but I really want to get to know you personally here and your deep philosophies about what we can do in the narrative that we're living in today. For people who are just joining in, Eric is like officially, he's a serial entrepreneur. He's run like multiple different like companies, businesses in different fields. This is the only element that I had to write down so I don't miss. In mobile computing, medical simulation, augmented reality gaming, 3D camera engineering, Hollywood special effects. This one I knew. WildFit I know. It's a nutrition company, and then there is business freedom that teaches this methodology on being an owner of a business rather than being a servant of the business, even as CEO. So there's a lot that you add value in so many different domains. Eric, it's such a pleasure to have you. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, I'm absolutely grateful to be here. I appreciate you creating the space, and it's so nice to see you again.
Perfect. I want to get into straight to the first question, and it ties into what Wendy told me on this call. She said, Eric has done this. This is the only program that I've completed, very few. And I hear that normally about all the students that learn from you is that there is, whether it's nutrition, whether it's public speaking, or whether it's running the business, one of the common patterns which I really look up to you for is this premise that it permanently shifts the mental narrative of the person who's learning from you. And I think that's very rare for any teacher in transformational space to teach something. And even 4 years later, I remember all the principles, philosophies that you've taught us in any different program that I learned from you. So I want to ask you, like, how did that start? And your ability of shifting permanently a mental narrative of anyone, including your own, I'm guessing. How did that come into being? And I want to open that a little bit.
I think it started, I worked for a sales company when I was 17 or 18 years old, and they would bring speakers to us. And the speakers would be funny, or they'd teach us good ideas, or they'd teach us good strategies. But what I would find is that I would leave the talk feeling very inspired and very motivated, but the next day I wouldn't be any different. For example, if one of our jobs was to do as many sales presentations as we could, then I would finish with the speaker and I'd be like, I'm going to do 20 tomorrow. I'm so excited. But then I'd wake up the next morning and I would just go back to my old habits. And it was information only. And so what happened for me is I started observing some of the speakers that I thought were capable of transformation. And I think that is the big difference. And by that, I mean, when I talk about speakers, I'm talking about even teachers that I had in school. I had a couple of teachers that were really good at transformation. I'll give you an example. I went to driving school, and I discovered in driving school that, driving a car had lots of interesting rules. And then the teacher, he said, now, sometimes when you're driving, you're going to find yourself in a dead stare. You'll be driving down the highway and you won't really be looking. You'll just be staring. And then you'll suddenly realize, and you'll go like 2-3 miles, and then you'll realize, oh my gosh, I didn't see much of the last 2-3 miles. Who's had that experience? Anybody had something like that when they're driving?
Yeah.
Okay, if you do that in Delhi, you're dead. You can't do that in Delhi. Okay. So, but anyway, he was explaining this, and he goes, now I want everybody to practice getting in a dead stare. So do it with me, just so you get a sense of how he taught this. Just kind of get into a dead stare. Don't actually look at the screen. Just cast your eyes on the screen and let your eyes defocus. And then he says, and what happens is you're driving like this and you're really defocused. And then he took a big stick and he hit the desk. Bam! And he goes, but that's what happens when you hit the car in front of you. And I was like, whoa, he scared the hell out of all of us. And then he started telling another story, and then he dropped us back into a deep stare, back into the deep stare, bam, and he did it again. And it was like, and you know what the crazy thing is? I turned 50 this month. And if I'm behind the wheel of a car and I just even start to drop into a dead stare, I immediately come out of it, because what he did is something called a pattern interrupt. He interrupted the pattern of behavior and he made it difficult for me to repeat it. So I started observing the difference between transformation, where real behavior was changed, and information, where it was just information being put in. And I started examining all of that and integrating those things into my programs so that my programs would be transformational as well as educational.
Wow, that is perfect. So I know, by the way, guys who are joining in, all the things that we are mentioning, I am certain that you would want to look up those things later much deeper. So we'll send all these resources to everyone so that they can discover Eric. It would be my pleasure. Following up on that, Eric, the reason why I asked you this question is the ability to shift a mental narrative and shift it permanently for other people that you're adding value to, or just for yourself. I think at this moment it's extremely relevant, and it's people are finding more and more difficult to just control the internal narrative. And I don't know how true is that, and I would love for you to validate it, especially for the generation that is born and raised with the generation of instant gratification. For that generation, it's particularly like a shock de-addiction therapy, this COVID-19, right? And just young students that I've been speaking with like over the last 2 days for some live webinars, the problem that they're expressing is I'm crying all day. I feel like crying all day and I don't know why. Right. And so I think how can one cultivate this power or control their own mental narrative?
One of the things to understand, and this is a little bit difficult to explain sometimes, but human beings evolved to live in nature. They didn't evolve. We didn't evolve to live inside buildings. We didn't evolve to live with cars and technology and electricity. And we can handle all those things because we've got big brains. So we can adapt. But there's certain parts of our bodies that are designed specifically for for surviving through what's going on right now. And so what happens is, when we have a fear response, we actually trigger our ancient fear response. So now you've got a bunch of, and by the way, you'll probably notice this, some of the older people are a little bit more calm about what's going on, and some of the younger people are freaking out because they don't have frame of reference. And so they're seeing this stuff on the news and it's bombarding them, and they're freaking out. And Gautam, I am so terribly sorry. I can hear the food delivery guy. I left the money out there for him, but I got to go see him. I'll be right back.
Okay. All right. So while Eric is back, I think what's the last question? Will this be an interactive session? Yes. So by the end of this call, we'll have an initial conversation and we'll keep last 10 to 15 minutes. That's the expectation I've set with Eric for questions and answers. If there's new questions that pop up in your head, put them in the chat and then we'll take it forward from there. We've already collected a few questions in advance from you guys. So those questions I will address before we join the call. And Eric is back with some nice berries, so let's get back to it.
Farm fresh raspberries. So let's go back to that question again. So Here's an example. Um, I use this one a lot. So if you've ever seen me on YouTube, you may have heard me talk about this, but let's imagine you're walking along and in nature, and you walk around a corner and there's a group of lions there, right? There's a group of lions. And would that, who would be frightened? Who would be frightened with a group of lions? Okay, good. Good. You should be. You should be. And because for them, you're just food. So you'd better be afraid. Now, what happens when you come around the corner is at that moment, and this is so important for you to understand right now relative to COVID-19. I want you to get this. It's so important. You walk around the corner and you see the lions. And at that moment, the lion becomes the most urgent thing in the world. Nothing else matters. And what happens is you start breathing differently and you start producing adrenaline. You start producing adrenaline and cortisol and stress chemicals. And as you start producing those stress chemicals, your body starts to put survival at number one, which means you break your connection with empathy. Other people don't matter so much anymore. Yeah, you might argue that your family matters, but you know what? Somebody who's drowning will push their own child under the water to get above the water. The more afraid you are, the less empathy you have. The other thing that happens is your relationship with logic becomes incredibly tenuous. We are only capable of the most simple logic when we're in fear response. Complex logic, not important in that moment. And the other thing is that our intelligence drops because thinking isn't the issue right now. Fight and flight and freezing, that's what's going on. But here's something else that happens. Your body also starts to divert resources to your strength. The best metaphor for this is if any of you have ever watched Star Wars or Star Trek or some sci-fi show where the captain goes, divert all power from the shields to the thrusters because we got to get out of here. In other words, turn off the immune system. We have to fight the lion. In fact, another way of explaining this is if you have a runny nose or diarrhea from some immune response you're having, and suddenly there's a lion there, this is a bit silly. I don't know if you guys know this expression, but in English, we have this expression that somebody got scared shitless. What that means is that when you're totally frightened, your immune response stops. The diarrhea goes away, the cold goes away, the fever goes away instantly. Because what it's saying is that's not important right now. Fighting this virus is not important right now. Fighting and running away from the lion is important. Now you understand what's going on is that the lion that everybody's afraid of today is 6 miles away. Do you understand? Like, sure, we need to be aware of coronavirus. We need to be aware of the economic impact. We need to be aware of it. But even for some of us who are like out of money and we can't pay the rent, even those things are not threatening your survival. They're logistical realities. You're not facing death, right? But the problem is your adrenal system doesn't know that. And so the more you look at the news, the more you upset yourself, the more you listen on it. Who's on Instagram? Who's on Instagram? All right. If you're on Instagram, first of all, follow me. You got to go follow me. I need more followers. But that's not the point. The real point here is if you're on Instagram, here's what I want you to do. Unfollow anybody who frightens you. If they frighten you, unfollow them. If they educate you, stay with them. If they're telling you the best protocols for immune system support, stay with them. If they're telling you, making you laugh, if they're posting cute videos that if it's upward, follow Upworthy. These things are worth following. But if they frighten you, do not follow them. Do not follow them. And don't look at the news because you know what the thing about the news is? It's a lie. The news is just clickbait. It's very small, thin facts veiled in marketing. It's not real anymore. You don't even know. If you must look at the news, then you've got to try to find the best trusted news source you can. In my opinion, maybe NPR in the United States might be one of the rare ones that I would consider looking at. But CNN, honestly, I mean, yeah, okay. If you can look through the lies, there are some facts in there. Fox, if you can look through the lies, I'm not even sure you can find any facts. And so I don't know what it's like where you guys all are, but what I'm saying to you guys is that if you are watching news and social media that's freaking you out, I just want you to take a deep breath and remind yourself that the lion is 6 miles away. And so you do need to be aware of it, but you shouldn't be panicking. The more stress you create in your body, the more you are suppressing your own immune system. And I think you can agree that's probably a bad idea.
Right. No, this is spot on, Eric. My question right now is that for like people who are not as deeply immersed in their personal growth as much as you, let's say, right? How does an average person who's seeking out positive information like that, but they're still living in a society which is, generally speaking, including the governments putting the lockdown, it's the pressure is still there on the mind psychologically. So I'm curious, maybe how do you center yourself every day, or what are the things that people can do to center themselves every day, like a mental, psychological, physiological reset that calms them every single day, for at least for this period that we're in.
You know, there's this funny story where I was reading, I was Wayne Dyer. Some of you might be familiar with Wayne Dyer, meditation spiritualist, author, and so on. And he said one day he was having a real problem. He was having a real problem, like a real problem. So you know what he did? He called his good friend Deepak Chopra. And he called his good friend Deepak and he said, Deepak, I'm having a serious problem. And Deepak says, meditate. And he's like, well, Deepak, it's Wayne Dyer. I know about meditating. I don't need you to tell me to meditate. Meditate. Look, I have a real problem. I need to talk it out with you. Meditate and call me back. And you know what? He never called him back because he meditated. And so I want to say to you that when you need to meditate the most is when you don't want to the most. The more you don't want to meditate, the more you need to meditate. So if you don't want to, the stronger your don't want to is, the more you should do it. And if you want to do it, you can do it as well. Now, I don't know how many of you guys are into meditation. I don't know. So if you don't like the word meditation, some people don't like it, then visualize. And if you don't like visualizing, then close your eyes. And if you don't like closing your eyes, then breathe deeply. What I'm trying to say is that what we need to do is realize that our body is this biochemical electric computer. It really is. It communicates with electrical signals. It communicates with chemical signals. So if you can't consciously change your thinking, which is sometimes hard to do, remember, once you've adrenalized yourself, intelligence goes down, empathy goes down, logic goes down. So it's really hard to come back. So then what you have to do is do a hardware reset. Are you guys ready for the hardware reset? One of them is take a bunch of deep breaths. Like guys, I'm going to tell you right now, people who think they're addicted to smoking, they are addicted to smoking, but they're not chemically addicted, in my opinion. They're not. You know, people quit cocaine, they get sick. They quit coffee, they get sick. They quit caffeine, they quit alcohol, they get sick. You know what happens when they quit smoking? Nothing. They shake. It's not a physical thing. It's an emotional thing. But you know what they're really addicted to? I'll show you right now. And if you want to prove it, you can just try it out. This is what they're addicted to. That's what they're addicted to, because when you breathe like that, your DNA gets a message, the environment is safe, because nobody breathes like that when there's a lion over there. Can you imagine? Oh, look, a lion. No way. When there's a lion over there, you go, and then you don't breathe, or you breathe really shallow. Why? So the lion won't hear you. So when you breathe deeply, you communicate to your cells that you're safe, and you make it easier to produce good feeling chemicals. And when you move slowly, and when you move your eyes slowly, and you chill out, and you maybe watch something that makes you laugh on TV instead of, like, this is not the time for watching The Walking Dead. I don't know why are people doing that? Like, this is the time for laughing and playing. And, you know, I don't know if you guys know the game charades or charades, depending how you pronounce it, but it's the best game in the world right now because it makes you get up and move your body. It makes you change your face. It makes you laugh. You got to remember, your emotions affect your physical body, but your physical body also affects your emotions. And so sometimes if you just can't get your mind in the game, you got to start with the body. So breathe deeply, eat well, stay hydrated, move your body, and then things will change.
Thanks, Eric. And I'm checking the comments right now. First of all, you did an Indian accent to almost all Indian participants. They're loving it. And I think the way you're responding, the way you're expressing these things, they're really resonating. I could already see in the messages. Next question that I have for you. I think when I was thinking about what can I have a conversation with Eric,
I can't believe I did that. Now you say it.
Yeah, I know. There's like, so far they liked it. I only saw happy comments, so that's good.
Okay, good. I'm glad.
And then, so yeah, adversity, right? So for us, The question that I wanted to ask, or like the theme of the conversation that I wanted to have for this call was how can one grow through adversity? Because I think you've talked about it in different shapes and form. One of your favorite models, one of my favorite models that you express, called the hindsight window. I want to go deeper into that aspect. But in general, like looking at this adversity, how can we make the most out of it, and how can we grow even stronger than we were before when we entered it? Like that's the question that I want to put to you.
This is one of those rare times where the question is the answer to the question. Here's what I mean. The minute something adverse is happening in your life, you have a choice. That adversity can either stimulate your growth as a human being, or it can stimulate your reduction as a human being. It's just the way it is, right? And so this is the thing. If something scary is happening in your life, like let's imagine for a minute there was a huge global pandemic and the guy that used to be on The Apprentice was president of the United States. Let's just imagine that was what was going on. And so if that's what was going on and you found that really scary, then you have a couple of ways of dealing with that. The one is you could go like, oh my God, this is so scary. What's going to happen to me? Right? You're asking like questions that might lead you down a scary path. But what if your question was, wow, how could I grow through this? How could this make me stronger? How could this event make me better? How could this event prepare me for what's coming next? Do you hear the difference in the energy of that? Like, here's something really fascinating. I asked a group, I had about, I don't know, 300-400 people on a live broadcast the other day. No, I'll just ask you. I'll ask you guys right now. Let's just do it as a group. And by the way, for those of you who don't have your cameras on, just get them on. It's way more fun if we can all connect a little here. But here's my question for you. Right now, thank you guys. Thank you. I really appreciate that. So here's my question for you. Holy cow, now there's lots of faces. Luckily, I don't do stage fright. So, all right. So here's my question. Now that there's so many cameras, oh, that's so nice to see you guys. Wow, thank you. So here's the question. Imagine it's Wednesday. I told you that I just found out the World Health Organization, everybody, President Trump, everybody agrees it's safe. The lockdown is over from Friday on. How many of you would be just a little disappointed you're not quite ready for the lockdown to be over? Look at this. It's like, oh my God, it's like 80%, 80%. And you know what's it's crazy. And by the way, guys, look, I know there are people that are suffering, and I know there are people that are locked up in terrible situations. I'm separated from my family. I know there are people that are in tough situations. What I'm trying to point out is that right now, many of us are feeling like, I'm just getting used to this new life. I'm just getting used to this new me. And by the way, how many of you feel like at first when this all started, you thought maybe it was going to be like 2 weeks, so you didn't really use the 2 weeks all that well? Did anybody have that? Like, I just, it's just like vacation. And now it's like, if this is going to last longer, I better make some changes, right? So here's the exercise for you. Who do you need to be when this is done? Who do you want to be? Who wants to be fatter when the lockdown is over? Who wants to be fatter? No. Who wants to be healthy, lean, and fitter? Anybody? Cool. Who wants to have a new, how about this? Who would like to play a new musical instrument that they never could play before? Anybody want to learn? Yeah, that'd be cool. Anybody want to learn a new language? Anybody want to learn a new work skill like programming or copy editing or any of that kind of, you see, who do you need to be in the new world? Let me tell you something about the new world. It will not be the same as the old world. It will never be. Look, the world is different post 9/11, and post 9/11 was tiny compared to what we're dealing with right now. Do you understand? The world was different after that. So the world will be even more different after this. So that means that we need to be stronger than we ever were before. We need to be smarter than we ever were before. And so you have two ways of going through the lockdown. You can veg your way through the lockdown, and you can get bigger and less healthy and dumber because you're watching garbage on TV and Netflix or whatever. Or you can use this the way somebody uses this when they're preparing for a big fight. You know, like in the movies, you know what it's like, right? In the fight movies, and they got that, they show 6 weeks in 6 minutes. And it's like, there was all the working out and the eating well and the exercise. Well, what if you got so clear about how you want to be at the end of this, that you then started creating rituals that got you there? I want this for all of you. Really hear me about this. I want every one of you 10 years from now, when somebody says to you, yeah, the lockdown came, what was it like? I want every one of you to say it just like this. Wow, it was so scary at first, but am I ever grateful today for the lockdown? Am I ever grateful for how it forced me to grow? Am I ever grateful for the skills that I learned and the connections that I made? I am so grateful for the lockdown in my life. That's how I want every one of you to feel in 10 years. Now, I'm not, listen, hear me carefully. I'm not saying that that means you're grateful for the people who suffered or you're grateful for the people who died. You're not. But people were suffering and dying before this anyway. So we can't measure that way. We have to look at our lives in this context. And so I'm saying, and by the way, how many of you guys have kids at home with you? Who's got kids home with you? Wow. Like now you know how much teachers are really worth, don't you? Now you know. I have a new conspiracy theory for you. It's not 5G. It was the teachers of the world that did this. That's what happened. The teachers of the world got together and they went to the biology teachers and said, could you create a virus that'll make everybody have to stay home? So finally, people will understand how valuable teachers are and pay us properly. It was all the teachers that did it. That's the theory. Now, but here's the thing. If you've got kids at home, here's what I want. I want your kids 5 or 10 years from now, when you go, hey, kids, and by the way, you know that they're living in history. This is one of those things that will be taught in history class, right? Well, they should be journaling it and scrapbooking it. I'll tell you what, you get their kids to journal and scrapbook about this, that's going to be valuable to them. But here's what I really want. I want when you ask your kids 10 years from now, do you guys remember the lockdown? And they go, lockdown, pandemic? Oh, you mean that time when we had to stay home for a few weeks and it was super cool? That's how I want your kids to remember it. And the only way that's going to happen is if we all see this as a grand adventure. And I know this is a longer answer, Gautam, than you were asking for, but I just want to say this. How many of you play video games or ever did play video games? Okay. What's the best part of the video game? What's the most fun part of the video game? What is it? Tell me in the chat. What's the best, most fun part of the video game, of any video game?
Accomplishing new levels.
Completing the levels, fighting the bosses, going through the hardest spots. Isn't it true? Like if you play a video game and it's too easy, then what? You don't play it anymore. If it's too hard, you might not play it anymore. But you know what? If it's too easy, you won't. What you want is to pass the tough levels. And that's when you feel the best. Well, wait a minute now. Life is the same. If your life was too easy, you wouldn't like it. You wouldn't like it at all. How many of you guys saw the movie The Matrix? Anybody see the movie The Matrix? Even in the movie The Matrix, the agent says to Neo, in the first version of The Matrix, we created utopic conditions for human beings and we lost entire crops because it seems that humans only enjoy their lives with a degree of suffering. That's right. It's not suffering we want, it's challenge. And so here you are. You're at the big boss, COVID-19 level. Are you going to rock it or are you going to let it rock you? And I'm thinking, let's go with the former.
Thank you, Eric. I think one of the things I love about you as a teacher is that you evoke emotions. And when you're expressing these things, even though they have been expressed in some different shapes and form, they land in a way that they stick with you for a long time. So I really appreciate that. And I also want to ask you, as if I were to be a bit more like, okay, yes, I know this is the advice. I follow like good Instagram channels and they share these things. I make the most out of this. And then the response is, okay, easier said than done. And what can I model after? So if I were to ask that, the first question that comes to mind, wait, what is Eric doing?
Gautam, first of all, like the next time somebody says easier said than done, just like ask them what they really want out of life. Like everything is easier said than done, isn't it? Yeah. Really? Like everything, like frankly, eating is easier said than done. I would like to eat these raspberries. That's very easy. Eating them takes some effort. And so when people use that stupid expression, easier said than done, I'm like, well, what did you expect? Of course it is. This is not the time for coming up with excuses not to take action. Do you know what's really easy? Taking no action. But you know what hurts the most in the long term? Taking no action. So sorry, Gautam, for interrupting you. I just want to be clear. If any of you are saying that, well, oh yeah, Eric says we should meditate. That's easier said than done. Yes. That's right. Everything worthwhile is easier said than done.
I think I will remember this answer so I can say it to other people every single time I receive this. The question that I had from that story that I wanted to borrow was, what is your day-to-day routine looks like right now?
I'm not such a routine person. I really am more of, I live my life sort of Aikido style. You know, I'm just, I kind of tend to go with what feels good. And I know that flies in the face of a lot of people saying you got to have a routine and routine. And there are times when I can be quite regimented about routine, but here's one example. I don't use alarms to wake up. Now, I never really used them before anyway, unless I had a flight to catch or something, but now I definitely don't. And I want you guys, any of you who can help it, don't set alarms. Like, we are the only animals in the world that unnaturally interrupt our sleep patterns. Yeah, it's ridiculous. You know, what we really need to be doing is sleeping properly. And by the way, one of the best things you could be doing for your mental health and for your immune system is sleeping properly. It's just absolutely important. So the one routine that I've been steadily working on achieving is going to bed at a reasonable hour. And I will admit to you, I've been finding that more challenging because my head is more busy. I'm working harder now than I was at all last year because I've created this TV show, the Thrive Time show, where I'm interviewing all these top experts on how to survive the pandemic and thrive through it. And I'm doing interviews all the time. I'm working really hard. So then by the time the night comes along, my head's quite busy and I find it a little harder. So you know what I did? I have a lighting system in my house. I programmed it to turn all the lights off at 10. So my house just goes dark at 10. It's like, oh man, I have to go to bed now. And, you know, so I'm coming up with life hacks that are helping to create some level of routine. But I think for me, the most important things to remember are go to bed at a reasonable hour. I will tell you right now, if you're going to bed after 10 o'clock at night, it's too late. I know you might be a night owl, so you can take your own governance on this, but I'm just saying it's really important to get to bed at a reasonable hour and then let yourself wake up naturally. And the more days you do that in a row, the healthier your sleep will become. In fact, we've got a sleep expert coming up on our show very soon to help people really craft their sleep. Then in terms of other routines, it's really important that I eat well. You know, that's super important to me. This is not the time for comfort foods. Please, guys, it really is not the time for comfort foods. Comfort foods will make you feel good for about 3 to 5 minutes, but they will make you feel bad for hours and days. It's not worth it. This is the time for eating really healthy foods and also making sure that you're hydrated. It's so important. And hydrated, you know, here's a clue for you. Do you know what is not, what is not water? Coca-Cola. It's not water. It's not water. Neither is 7-Up or Pepsi or beer. You know, neither is milk or even fresh or even fruit juices. Those things are not water. You know what is water? Water is water. And so I think that's got to be definitely part of my routine. And I'm really diligent about it. Every single interview I do, I fill the bottle up before the interview and I make sure it's empty by the end. So, you know, I think maybe there are other people that have much more, like I wake up at 9 and then I do, or 6. Or no, I'm a fan of Robin Sharma and I wake up at 5 a.m. And then by 5:15, I've conquered 4 countries. And by 5:26, I've written 6 books. Yeah, you could live a regimented lifestyle like that too. And I think there's real power behind that type of routine. But for me, during the pandemic, bear in mind, I don't have my family with me. Of course, it would be different if they were here. But my routine is about taking care first of my physical and mental health and then everything else.
Perfect. That's exactly the kind of answer I was looking for. Thank you. Next thing I want to check with you is, like, I'm certain that you've seen different phases, different versions of these pandemics in your professional life itself. You mentioned 9/11, there was 2008 crisis, must be even more, but there's some significant crises that do come and then they pass on. But then you move on from them and then you get back to life. And one of the question that comes to my mind is that majority of this is one of the LifePlugin teachers that posed this question to me, Pancham. Said my hope is that most people who are going through this, there's a lot of self-reflection, a lot of new things that we're discovering about ourselves. We are trying to tweak our routines and, you know, turning our business practices, our relationships dynamics are shifting for the better or for worse. It's a different conversation, but they are shifting. They're growing in different ways. But as soon as the pandemic ends, his hope is that I wish people can keep this experience or the learnings from this experience and don't get back to the old routine.
Gautam, here's the great news. This is going to last at least another 5-6 weeks, at least. I can't imagine it ending any sooner than that. And by the way, I've been saying it's going to last another 6 weeks. I've been saying that for 3 weeks now, and it's still 6 weeks. Like it is. And you can take that as good or bad news. Right now, I suggest that you look at every bit of news and realize that every bit of news you could get has good and bad to it. So the bad of it is the economy's suffering and that stuff's really scary and all that sort of stuff. But the good of it is that it gives you a chance to really get to know yourself and so on. Here's what's great or dangerous. Anything that you do for 21 consecutive days, and yes, there's different research on this in terms of how many days it is, but my experience is that the reason that the research indicates that sometimes habits can be created shorter or longer is it depends on how often you're doing the stuff. If you're doing it daily, 21 days seems to be like a magic number. So anything that you do for 21 days in a row is likely to become habitual. It's going to become habitual for a couple of reasons. The one is that you will create new neural pathways. In other words, new circuitry in your brain. And as you create that new circuitry in your brain, that circuitry will become comfortable and you'll just want to keep doing those behaviors. This is both good and bad news. Come on now. I want some honesty here. How many of you have probably been watching a little more, say, TV or movies than is probably a good idea? Who's been doing a little bit of that? Okay. So here's the thing. If you're doing that, you have to understand you're creating a habit that you're probably going to keep at the end of this pandemic. It's no longer just about the hour you're wasting now. It's no longer about the 2 hours you're wasting now or the 4 hours you're wasting now. It's about the fact that you're creating a habit that you're quite likely to keep. Do you understand how important this is? So your behavior now is currently reprogramming your biochemistry and your physical circuitry. It's reprogramming you. And so anything you do every single day is likely to be something that you'll have a hard time not doing in the future. How many of you are eating some foods on a regular basis that you know are not perfect, but they kind of make you feel better? Come on, let's be honest, have a little few chapatis over here. What's going on? All right. So here's what I'm trying to say to you. If you're doing that stuff every day, then you're beginning to create emotional, biochemical, and physical addiction to that behavior. You're going to turn it into a habit, and then you're going to be stuck with that habit at the end. So one of the things I would suggest to you is create a list. In fact, I'd like to see in the chat a list of some behaviors that they're okay if you want to do them a little bit, but it would be a bad idea to turn them into a habit, so you wouldn't want to do them daily. So what are some of the things that you might want to not do so much of? I'm not saying never. I'm just saying not so much. You know, like we already talked about, watching TV. Give me in the chat here. Okay, so staying up late, fighting with boyfriend. That's probably too much. Netflix, desserts, binge eating, watching Netflix. Wow, Netflix, sleeping late, eating bread, snoozing in the afternoon. There you go. So now what I want you to do is, and by the way, I want to tell you something about interactivity in an education program. If you want to know, and I'll tell you the stuff Gautam said about the way my programs work, that people actually finish them and they actually transform. One of the principles is we get people involved. Now, I want you to know, for those of you who wrote something down, you have just experienced a little degree of transformation that people who didn't write something down didn't experience. Let me explain it to you in case you ever want to teach. When you wrote it down, you took that thing and created a new tagging for it in your brain. So somebody just wrote here, let's see here, too much social media addiction. Okay, so it's quite a few people wrote that. If you wrote that, then used to be social media use was just a thing. But today you tagged social media use with, oh my God, that's a habit I don't want to make. Do you understand? You added a new tag for that behavior, which means you are more empowered to change it. If you didn't write it down, you didn't create that tag the same way. That's why interactivity in education makes such a big difference. Now, for those of you who did write it down, those of you who didn't, I want you maybe to do that as an exercise for yourself. Take out a piece of paper, and every time you find yourself doing something, you go, wow, I'm okay doing this right now, but would I want to do this my entire life every day? And write it on the list. And then now you have this thing where you're going to say, you know what? I'm not going to do this all the time. And I'll tell you what, I didn't know how long this was going to last. The first week, pretty much every night, 2-3 hours in front of Netflix, no problem. And then I started going, I think this is going to be a couple months. And that means this could become a habit. I stopped. I'm not saying I stopped all Netflix. I just created a new set of rules about it. And now I look at the day and I go, all right, I've achieved everything I want to achieve. I now might do 1 hour, and then I go off and read a book and go to bed. I changed everything because I didn't want to create the habit for the future. Now, here's the next list. Who do you want to be at the end of this? And what are some of the things that you think you need to do? Like, some of you said you wanted to learn a musical instrument. Who would like to learn or to sing or a musical instrument? I got to tell you, here's my personal journey. I've never thought of myself as particularly musical. It's not really been my thing. I enjoy singing as long as there's no human being within 500 miles of me, and then it's okay. Then I quite like singing. It's fun. I've always kind of wanted to learn how to play the guitar, but I'm not musical and I'm not good at it, so I wouldn't even know where to begin. But then I thought, well, I'm here. And no kidding, I spent only 5 minutes a day on the guitar because I wanted to create a habit. If I tried to do an hour a day, that would be too much and I wouldn't be able to create the habit. I just did 5 minutes a day. And then you know what started happening on the weekends, where I used to be wanting to watch Netflix, I suddenly found myself wanting to play the guitar, and I was doing like an hour and a half playing on the guitar. Here's something crazy. Still can't play the guitar. I can kind of pick my way through a couple of songs here and there, but one of the keys to learning to play the guitar is you got to learn chords, right? You got to learn to play chords. Well, here's the thing. This is G. That's G. This is, here we go, is A. Oh, sorry, that's not A. This is A. That's E minor. This is C. That's A minor. I've learned them all in like a week. It's incredible. And by the way, if you know those 6 chords, do you know how many pop songs you can play? All of them. I mean, you got to learn the right order. But what I'm trying to get at is that we all have the opportunity right now. We all have the opportunity right now to learn new stuff. And all you got to do is just start doing a little bit every day. You know, if you want to learn a martial art, there's tons of YouTube videos where you can begin getting you want to learn yoga. Here it is. Anything you do every day in lockdown, you get to keep when lockdown is over. So, but what you got to do is start at the end. What would you like to be like at the end? Who do you want to be at the end? And then you can reverse engineer what you need to be doing every day to get there.
Wow. Eric, that hit home. Like the idea that every single thing that we do in this period becomes critical, because that will stay with us for a long time. So I think the excuses completely shift, because you just change the lens through which I should look at my daily routine and daily things that I'm doing, good and bad, because they are definitely becoming habits. I think that's a very beautiful way to express it. Thank you. I know I want to be mindful of your time. There's about 15 minutes left. Before we get into some of the questions, a lot of these things that I've asked you we collected these questions from the people before, from the attendees in advance, so that we make it efficient. Before we get into questions in the chat, I want to ask you, what are you interested in in the last few months, or what are your exciting projects that you're working on right now, so that we get to follow those things.
What are the most exciting projects I'm working on right now?
Yeah.
There's a couple things. The one is I started this YouTube channel called Thrive Time, and we haven't fully launched it, but we've done the first 20 episodes. And then this week coming, we're going to get into full launch mode. And it's really been fascinating. I've interviewed like some top experts on parenting. I had Dr. Shafali talking about parenting. I had John Gray, who wrote the Mars Venus books, talking about relationships. And I've got some really neat guests, and I've really been enjoying that a lot. My team and my clients and fans have been asking me for years to create some kind of podcast or interview show. And I've never really, I'm on the plane all the time. I don't have time for that. But now that I'm home, I decided, what the hell, I'll jump in. And it has been so rewarding and so much fun. And I've learned so much. The other thing is that I've been working on a book for the last year or so called Post-Diabetic, Becoming Post-Diabetic. And it's all about reversing type 2 diabetes. And we've decided to try to move the schedule of that up, because what you guys might have beginning to start to see reports is that metabolic syndrome, obesity, diabetes, those things are all very dangerous for people that have COVID. And what we're actually beginning to see is that I don't even think, and this is maybe not a super popular opinion, but I don't even think COVID is a particularly bad bug. I think it's a bug that's really dangerous in a population full of unhealthy people. And so we're really big on getting this book out there to help people reverse their diabetes. And because it's totally, guys, here's the funny thing about diabetes. I don't think of it as a disease. I think of it as a repetitive stress injury. It's a repetitive stress injury. You're eating too much sugar, too often, too regularly, the wrong kind, and then your pancreas gets stressed out and you end up like spraining your pancreas. And so it's a repetitive stress injury. And by the way, are there any doctors on the call with me right now? Are there? I'm just looking around for hands here. I only ask because I've had a couple of doctors go, oh yeah. Because here's the thing, when somebody gets diagnosed with diabetes right now, they get prescribed drugs that they presume, drugs or insulin or whatever, that they're going to end up taking for the rest of their lives. And it doesn't have to be that way. It's an injury that can be recovered from. Those are my really most exciting projects at the moment. So yeah, thanks for asking.
Okay. Thanks. And a bunch of people commented, what's the name again? What's the link? I will send all these resources after this call to everyone. So all the right places to find Eric. But I just
Actually, there's two others,
wanted
Gautam.
to
There's
check
two
if there are any
others.
more.
There's
Yeah,
two
tell
others
me.
as well that you've reminded me of. The one is that I'm doing a masterclass on how to prepare, basically my formula for putting together keynote presentations for online delivery. And so we're doing that. That's really cool. That's through Speaker Nation. And then the other thing, and this has not been officially announced, so my team's going to yell at me. Some companies have like a swear bucket. We don't. We have an Eric mentions ideas before they're ready bucket, and then I have to put money in when I. But anyway, we're one of the things that we're currently putting the blueprint together for is a program teaching my methodology for creating digital education programs. So my digital education, as Gautam mentioned earlier, like people finish them. Our WildFit program is 2 years in a row the highest rated program by the customers, highest rated program on the Mindvalley. See, we even have evidence. But the highest rated program on the Mindvalley platform 2 years in a row. And so for the first time ever, I've never taught it before, but for the first time ever, we're going to teach my formula for how to, and I want you all to think about that for a minute, because every single one of you has life experiences and stories that are really valuable. You might not know that, but they are to somebody else. Some of you are really good at parenting. Some of you are really good at homeschooling. Some of you are very good with pets. Some of you are very good at writing. Some of you are very good at gardening. Some of you are very good at cooking. And you don't have to become like a famous 1 million follower Instagram follower to create a business out of that. You need a couple hundred dedicated fans and you can create a business. And so that's why we want to teach people how to do that in this new economy.
Wow. I'm really looking forward to that. When is it coming this year?
It'll be, we're trying to get it out as quickly as possible. And so keep an eye on my Instagram account and we'll make announcements there.
Perfect. I'll also check in with your team for all the relevant links so that I'll check in with Kelsey and I'll send the right ones to everyone who joined the call. Cool. Super, super useful. Thank you. Personal question, Eric. I think you just turned 50. Belated happy birthday. I wished you already on Facebook. You've been working for over 30 years, and I know personally that the place that you come from is genuine, adding value from a place of humility and service. And you've been doing it for 30 years, more than 30 years. What keeps you going?
I think there's two things that really keep me going. One is insatiable curiosity. I'm always curious about stuff. And that's, I think that's maybe one of my assets, that our education world these days works on a principle of convergent intelligence. In other words, you go to school to converge all your intelligence in one truth, in one right and wrong. Kids are born with divergent intelligence. In other words, if you ask the average kid, here's a brick, what is it? And they go, it's a brick, it's a car, it's a spaceship, it's a weapon, it's a fort, it's a house. It could be anything. You ask an adult what it is, it's a brick. And that's because as we get older, our mental flexibility it atrophies a little bit. And so one of the things I've been really lucky about is that I've got such a wide curiosity about the world that I'm able to connect dots that a lot of times other people don't. WildFit, for example, it's a connection of a series of dots: nutritional anthropology, evolutionary biology, evolutionary psychology, and modern behavioral change psychology. I couldn't have put the program together if I wasn't curious about all of those things. And so curiosity drives me. And I always say that, people ask me, Eric, when will you stop teaching and speaking? Like 5 minutes after I'm not interested in learning anymore. If I'm not interested in learning, I have no right to be teaching. That's how I feel about it. And then the other thing that drives me is, I don't know what you'd call it, but it's like, say, an overactive empathy or something. And that is that I just don't like seeing people suffering. I don't like seeing people in pain. I don't enjoy it. I don't like it. I feel it in my body like a physical response. And so when I have the opportunity to help people end that, it juices me. And so whether that's teaching entrepreneurship or public speaking, because you know what? The vast majority of people have messages they want to get out to the world in some way. They're just scared to do it because some teacher or parent or somebody one day said the wrong thing at the wrong time and made them afraid. They weren't ever naturally afraid. And so when I see somebody like not feeling safe about communicating, I want to make them feel safe. And so, and same thing with WildFit. When I see somebody that I know, look, listen, I'll tell you guys something. And it's so important. please hear me. If you see somebody that's like really overweight, come on, be honest with me now. How many of you have a little bit of judgment about that? Like they eat too much or they don't move around enough. They're not taking care of their health. Has anybody ever had that feeling a little bit? Yeah, especially if that person tries to sit beside you on the plane. You know what I'm talking about? Here's what I want you to know. It's not their fault. It's not their fault at all. It was never their fault. We are living in a world where our governmental food regulations and food education is being bought and paid for by a profit-driven food manufacturing industry that doesn't give a damn about your health. And so sugar is snuck into just about everything because it's addictive and profitable. And so the next time you see that person who's, you want to know which curve we should flatten? We should flatten two curves, the infection curve and the curve above the belly, because that curve is dangerous with this virus out there. But when you see that person with the curve, don't judge them for it. It's not their fault. We're basically like zoo animals that are being fed by the zookeepers, and the zookeepers don't give a damn about how healthy we are. And so you can see I've got a little passion about that. And so that's really what drives me is when somebody asks a question and that question is attached to some pain they're experiencing, I just so badly want to find them that answer, even if I don't have it yet.
Wow. And Eric, you're one of those teachers that I openly, aggressively would offer people to study from, because it's just, there's just so much value that you add in every single thing that you're saying, and all the people who are listening. It's learning from Eric. It's every single program shines through every single thing that you've expressed, the transformation, the lifelong shift in perspective. So I highly recommend following this man and learning more from him. There's a bunch of people who study from you who are also agreeing on the chat. And I'm being very mindful of the time. I know we have 6 minutes left. If there are a few questions that haven't been addressed yet, I think we'll just look at the chat. And Eric, after 6 minutes, you can just run away, but I just want to close this properly. So I'll just check if there are any unchecked questions, and then we'll get to it. Okay, well, I think I will ask one which we had collected before, and that's addressing your core values. And I think you talk about freedom as your core value, and it's pretty evident in all the things that you do in the world. What's your connection to core values? How important do you think they are? What are your core values? Curious.
I think freedom is it's careful to talk about it as a core value, because freedom in itself is a bit of a trap. So what I want to suggest is that for me, freedom means the freedom to do what I want to do when I want to do as much as I want to do it, and also the freedom to not do the stuff that I don't really want to be doing. And I think that a lot of people are like, here's an example with food. People go, well, I don't want to go on a diet because I value my freedom. Okay, so in that case, all they're talking about is the freedom to eat what they want. They're not talking about the freedom to not eat what they wish they wouldn't eat. How many of you, there are foods you'd like to be free from? I'm curious. How many of you have foods you'd like to be free from? You wish that it didn't have a hold on you. You see what I'm talking about? So there has to be freedom in both directions, the freedom to do what you want and the freedom to not do what you wish you wouldn't do. And so freedom's a high value for me. And then other things include honesty, and even more than external honesty. I'm a really big fan of personal honesty. Like years ago, I developed this skill where I heard this guy speaking about your value as a human being, and he talked about your word, and he said, really, your truth, your value as a person is really just your word. Will you do what you say you're going to do? And he said, so you should always keep your promises. And I realized, like, I was like everybody else, like Hollywood has just changed what a promise is. That here's a clue. In the movie, if the guy says, I'll be right back, I promise, he's not coming back. You understand that? Like in the movies, I'll be right back, no, not coming back. And we've all been kind of taught that promise means I really hope that I'm going to come back. No, it doesn't. Promise means come hell or high water, I'm going to make this thing happen for you. And so I, for an entire year, didn't break a single promise. Anybody have a guess how I did that? I didn't make any. I made the distinction between a commitment and a promise. But here's the real beauty of it. I did it for me. So if I say to myself, I promise that I won't do this for the next week, then I will not, because I've removed the decision away. And that's one of the strongest values that I have, is that personal integrity, that personal honesty, if you will. Other values that are really important to me are community and connection. Like, you know, I really believe that contribution is a big part of our lives. And I know that I'm always willing to do more for other people than I am for myself. I think that's a good start. I mean, there's probably a lot more in there, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Like, I think as you were saying them, I felt like, yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. So spot on. Eric, I just want to take this opportunity to thank you for joining us, adding value to the Life Plugin audience. I think it's on my list. It's happening sometime. I don't know when, but it is a promise that will be kept, that you will be brought to India physically at some point with Life Plugin. It's my hope to bring it at least in the next 3 years maximum with your busy, crazy schedule.
Okay.
But
And I promise no Deepak impressions when I get there. I won't do it.
I'm not sure if you will keep that promise. No, Eric, thank you so much. You always add way too much value, more than I could ever imagine. Every time you teach, every time you show up for other people, so it shines through every time. Thank you for your time. I wish you the best, and yeah, I will see you very soon. Thank you.
Hey, you're so very welcome. And I absolutely, you know, for sure, I absolutely am up for coming. I really would love to do a long trip in India. And I've really been making my list of post-pandemic adventures that I want to have, and India is definitely on that list. I've been many times before. I've been to Ranthambore and Sariska, taking pictures of tigers and that kind of stuff. And I even used to have a small software company in Delhi, but I haven't been there for years. So let's make it happen when this is all over. Thank you guys so much for being here with me. And it's just been just a delight to see your shining faces. And thank you. Privileged. Thank you.